Hi there, Abigael Puritz here, and today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to carve and print a linoleum cut print. I'm going to be using speedball mounted linoleum. I don't know if there's some focus. I like to use mounted linoleum because I print on the letterpress and you can't do it unless it's mounted. Also, I think the mounted ones are easier to handle. There gives you more to grip onto. So, yeah, let's get started. Okay, so to start off with, I'm going to be drawing my design that I want to carve. Well, you can draw right onto the linoleum, but I like to draw on paper first. So the next step is just to take a darker pencil or a pen, doesn't matter which, and go over the lines that you like the best. It's just like inking in a comic, except that it doesn't really matter if your line quality is perfect or if you're using a pen. So next step, take some tracing paper over our drawing, and then we're going to take a nice soft leaded pencil and we're going to trace over our drawing. So now we have this tracing of our drawing. Looks amazing. And now what we're going to do is put the drawing on linoleum. Flip this over so the side with the graphite on it is facing the linoleum. And you basically just sort of put it on there as if you're wrapping a present. You want to make sure it's really perfectly lined up. You want to take your time with this and make sure it's perfect, or else your drawing is going to be on the linoleum wrong. I've put my tracing paper drawing onto linoleum, made sure it's secure, made sure it's nice and taut, it's not going anywhere, there's not a lot of play in there. And then I'm going to take this, which is a bone folder, which is a bookbinding tool. You can also use a spoon, you can also use, I don't know, the back of a marker, another linoleum, it doesn't really matter. But you want something that's smooth, hard, and easy for you to rub with. So I'm going to take this. And the important thing is when you're doing this is not to use anything that's too pointy, because you really don't want to rip your tracing paper. So I'm just going to start from the edges, and I want to press nice and hard in tiny little strokes, like little circles. Sometimes if you're doing a bigger thing, like a big sheet, I like to draw a grid onto the tracing paper and sort of transfer it via like going through the grid so that you make sure you get the entire drawing. Because one thing that really sucks is if you take your tracing paper off and then you realize you totally forgot to transfer a section and then you have to line it back up and it's a pain in the butt. Okay, so now I think I've transferred most of it, and what I'm going to do now to make sure is I'm going to pull up part of the tracing paper very carefully, leaving part of it taped down, just so I can like take a look and see how well it transferred. It looks like it transferred really nicely. Normally I would take a Sharpie or some really like nice sturdy black marker and I would ink in all my lines. But in this case, I don't think I'm going to need to do that, so I'm going to skip that. So, these are some woodcut and linoleum cut tools. But for this particular demo, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to be using the standard speedball carving tool. And these are neat because they come with a little cartridge, so you can keep your little bits right inside them. I don't because I'm neurotic, but you can. Another pro tip, I like to put hair tie or rubber band around the top so that it's easier to hold on to, gives you a better grip. Here is one of the tools. I don't know how well if I can get it to show up, but this is the one I probably use the most. This is the tiny V-gouge. It's a little guy. You got all different kinds. This is like a big U-shaped gouge. Most of the beginner kits come with like 5 or 6 gouges. This is a medium-sized V-gouge. Before we start carving our beautiful little drawing, you always want to do testers. You always want to get comfy with your tools before you start. The first thing you always want to do is take a block and just try to make every kind of texture that you can think of. And so one way I like to hold the pen, this is like this. This also tends to decrease your chance of injuring yourself a lot because you're not like going like this. This is a great way for it to just slide off the linoleum and right into your hand, which a lot of people do. This is a much safer route, and also it gives you a lot of strength and power. You actually use your top fingers still to guide it, and use your wrist a lot to guide it. But it's not as likely to go whoop. And you do occasionally do this, but you really don't want to do most of your stuff like this. I'm just gonna start making some different textures and seeing what I can do. One trick that I really like to do is take a nice dark colored marker and just color in your linoleum. This is again another reason why sometimes I will paint my linoleum black with India ink before I even start. Like really see the marks you're making a little bit better. Because as you can see, if you're just going right onto the linoleum, you might not be able to see it as well. So try it with a bunch of different gouges. Get a feeling for it. Make every texture you can think of. And try all of your tools at least once. We've played with our tools, we've tried our different gouges. Now it's time to carve our drawing, right? Wrong. Actually, it is time to plan our value. Planning out which things are going to be different textures and colors, or not colors obviously, but values. And I need to do that with different markers. A lot of the time you're going to be working on something that's much bigger, and you're really going to want to remember that this is dark and this is light, or vice versa. Okay, so I've worked out my values. The little X's where it's going to be black. This also is important. If I was doing like a real big project, I would probably also color the black in too, because this is really your opportunity to see the composition and the full range of values before you start carving. Next step, I like to go with the easiest things first. So I like to start off cutting out the big white spaces. So I'm just going to go around and start outlining the big white shapes with my little tiny gouge. So yeah, carving around the white spaces. And one thing that's important is keep your linoleum moving. You don't want to keep it in the same position because you want to make sure that you're always carving from the strongest position, from the position that gives you the most grip on what you're doing and the most control with your hands. Especially when you're doing little detailed bits like, you know, faces, or foliage, or, you know, whatever. So I'm gonna carve in the face. I don't know if it's focusing. The little eye here. This is one of the few places I would actually go like this, because this is very detailed. So when you're doing something that's super detailed like this, a lot of the time you're gonna want to brace the tool with your finger to make sure that it's not going too fast. You really don't want it to slip. Once we've carved out all the white shapes in our print, now we're going to take a larger gouge, usually a U gouge. For large shapes, you use a bigger gouge. For smaller shapes, use a smaller gouge. I like this one. It's about that big. And you're just going to start clearing out all of these bigger white shapes. It's time to go in and do our patterns. One quick thing I'll say is that if you were doing a larger print, you would take these different bigger gouges and really try to mix it up with the patterns. Like I was saying, try everything. But in this case, for such a small print, it would kind of overwhelm it if I used a bigger gouge to make big patterns. So I'm probably going to be sticking mostly to cross-hatching and variations on cross-hatching on this, both because it's small and because it's more robotic aesthetic and not something where really crazy patterns would make much sense. Okay, so I finished carving. I decided to put some patterns here because I thought it might look a little bit weird without anything. Patterns are a little light, so it'll be interesting to see whether or not they print right. On a letterpress, you would always be able to get little textures like this, but you know, when you're printing at home, you're not always able to get the super fine textures. Alright, I'm going to clean up and set up for printing. Okay, now we're going to talk about what you need to print. So, first thing is first, gonna want to pre-cut some nice printmaking paper. I like to use Arches cover paper for a lot of my stuff. That's my own personal preference. A roller. I like to get the hardest one that I can get because the hardest ones are better for getting fine detail. Some plexiglass or glass to put the ink on so you don't make a mess. Palette knife. Brayer. Your block. Lots of newsprint. Tons of it. And of course the star of the show is your ink. I'm going to be using water-soluble black ink because I'm not in a print shop, I'm in my home, and you do not want to have to use solvents in your home. It's bad news. I almost forgot to say one of the most important things you need is a pair of good gloves. Because one of the important things is keeping your good paper clean, and the gloves help you do that. Okay, so time for the fun part. Gonna squeeze out some ink. I don't really need a lot. And you want to take your brayer and just start spreading it out. Now we're gonna start rolling our ink on. Start light, don't put too much ink on it first. Don't put too much pressure on, just nice light pressure, going a lot of different directions. You really want to build it up. So if you can see, this is what it's looking like right now. Neat. This is always an exciting moment where you see ink for the first time. Now, let's just print our first proof. And let's just see how this looks. You really don't want to take off your gloves until you're printing your final, like your good paper. That's called the addition in printmaker speak. Alright. First proof. Ooh, neat. Alright, let's make another proof, but a little bit more ink this time. You're listening for a very slight hissing sound. That's how you really know there's enough ink. Like a little baby snake. And voila. Look at that. How fancy. Alright, so I've inked this up fully, done some proofs, and now I'm taking off my gloves because I'm going to use the good paper now. So, gloves off, clean hands, let's go for it. Line it up, try to make sure it's centered. The important thing is once you put it down with confidence. You don't want to rub it around because then, you know, it'll just be a mess. Small circles. Ta-da! Alright. You can see it's not quite filled in all the way there, but for me right now, this is pretty good. So I'm going to stop it there. I hope you've had fun watching my tutorial. Remember to wash your tools right away because it's really bad if the ink dries on your tools. And see you later. Bye.